Thank you for great presentations and insight about your country cases. My name is Rustam. I'm from Central Bank of Azerbaijan, leading Financial Stability Department. Recently, we adopted sustainable finance roadmap and started implementation. A few challenges that we faced while preparation and implementation, I would like to get your insight about that. First of all, when we talk about sustainable finance, besides environmental, there are social and governance, and we had a difficulty in quantifying and converting specific actions of the social and governance aspects. So if you have any, some hints for us in that case, how to convert these objectives to measurable specific actions. And second, when we look at awareness, we understand it's very important. Besides the awareness in financial sector, it's important to have the awareness of the private sector, I mean households and MSMEs, because there should be some demand for such products along with some stimulus, etc. But it is outside of the limit of central bank. So if there are any cases to share about how successfully develop programs in partnership with different entities to increase awareness in households and MSMEs. Yeah, thank you.
Let me welcome the Chief of Finance Sector, Ju Pyu Lee, for a short recap of day one and look ahead of the events today. Thank you.
We also want to have a very good session today, and a lot of good topics, all of them DB and IFIs. And as you know, this is a very crucial topic, and we all strive to respond to the climate crisis. Change, adaptation, and mitigation requires participation.
We must run fast and we must run together at the same time. Thank you. Session 2 will be on how supervisors and regulators in Asia are supporting green financial markets. This should provide fascinating insights into how Asian supervisors go about confronting the challenge of making their financial systems greener in terms of managing climate-related financial risks and getting financial systems to scale up climate investments. Let me welcome our ADB's Vice President for Operation, Mr. Ahmed Saeed, who will moderate this session. Thank you very much, sir. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Is this working?
Yeah.
Thank you. It's some audiences you appreciate because they're large, and some you appreciate because they're influential. And I think that we're privileged today at ADB to have such an important and distinguished group of people with us to talk about very important news for this session on how supervisors and regulators in Asia are supporting green financial markets, and a special thank you to my fellow panelists. My name is Ahmed Saeed. As was just noted, I'm Vice President for East Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific here at the ADB. Now, we all know that much has been written about the role of financial supervisors in fighting climate change. This is a topic that has been explored in many venues, including the NGFS and other international supervisory bodies. I think that many of us in this room would concur with the assessment that climate risks, whether they're fiscs, can clearly become financial risks, and as such, also beginning to explore both the necessity and the possibility. We know also that climate risk mitigation measures can be incorporated into macroprudential policies, as more and more supervisors are acknowledging that climate risks are potential systemic risks. Systemic buffers and concentration buffers will also, of course, be options that supervisors could consider. Against this background, it's interesting and timely to take stock of where Asian financial supervisors stand in this regard, to compare experiences with each other, and to share lessons from other countries. I will not say more advanced countries, because I think that that is a presumption that has to be proven in this context. in particular as to how to address possible challenges in implementing these various recommendations. And before introducing the session, just by way of mentioning, in case anyone considers these topics, at least at a theoretical level, to be settled, I would just note that just last week, actually just a couple of days ago, I happened upon an article in the Financial Times referencing some recent statements from Federal Reserve Governor Christopher Waller, who expressed his view that there's no need for central banks to pay special attention to risks to the financial system from climate change because there's no obvious danger to financial stability, at least in the near term. I share that issues. So let me begin. I'm very, very pleased and excited that we're joined by this extremely distinguished and insightful panel. And I'll just introduce them very briefly, beginning from my left. Satoshi Ikeda, thank you for joining us. Ikeda-san is the Chief Sustainable Finance Officer of the Financial Services Agency of Japan. We're also very privileged to be joined by ANAR SADYKAVA. She's the head of Prudential Regulation Methodology Division of the Department of Methodology and Prudential Regulation of the Agency of the Republic of Kazakhstan for Regulation and Development of Financial Markets. That is a very long title. I'm sure your comments will be worthy of it. Next, after that, INARNO DJAJADI, Chief Executive of Capital Market, Financial Derivatives, and Carbon Exchange Supervision in OJK, the Indonesian Financial Services Authority. His Excellency Pen THIRONG, Undersecretary of the Cambodia Ministry of Economy and Finance. Dr. KWANGIL, Director of the Fair Market Division of the Korea Financial Securities Commission. And I'm also very pleased to mention that we have with us online Bushra Shafiq, joining us virtually, who is the Senior Joint Director, SME Housing and Sustainable Finance Department at the State Bank of Pakistan. Thank each and every one of you for joining us. And let's dive right into it. So let me just begin by opening questions, but before that, remind the audience that we will be reserving some time for Q&A from the floor, and please do use the Q&A chat box. We'll be coming to those questions towards the end of the session. So let me begin, Your Excellency Pen THIRONG, with you, if you would permit me. Could you share with us the needs in terms of sustainable investments in order to achieve a successful transition in Cambodia? Thank you.
I divided this into 2 or 3 points. Number 1 is about the policy commitment of the government. The high level of policy commitment from the government, starting from the public sectors, the banking, as well as the non-banking sectors. In the public sector, there's a commitment, the high-level commitment of the policy, that we have the strategic plans, whatever you call it, roadmaps, 2013 to 2030 on the climate change action. It was adopted in 2013. Along the time until now, and recently, late last year, our government adopted the 6 principles of the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action, Helsinki, 6 principles. I don't need to mention the 6 principles. So we are member of the Coalition of the Finance Ministers for Climate Action. That's at the policy level. Then point number 2, how could we or can we mainstream or incorporate such kind of requirements or commitment, policy commitment in our country system? So there's public sector, there's a private sector. In private sector, there's a banking sector and other non-banking sectors. I'm from the Ministry of Economy and Finance, so I will not know the detail in the banking and non-banking, but just to say a few words on banking and non-banking. We have central banks, and central banks always endorse, you see, the proposal of the bankers, commercial banks, to go for green financing projects. And for the non-banking sector, banking sector, we have also the Bankers Association. The Banker Association also work closely with, you see, under the regulators of central bank, and they also raise the awareness and encourage, you see, the implementation of a policy commitment of the governments in terms of green. So they support the green financing activities or projects also. In the public sector, we have also the what we call SERC, the Securities Exchange Regulators of Cambodia. I mean, Cambodia Securities Exchange. So they just adopted, you see, the handbooks for green bonds issuance. I think in corporate bonds sector. So it's part of the Ministry of Economy and Finance structure, but it's a regulator for government for securities, for bonds, capital markets in general. So this is the policy commitments and the implementation of policy commitment gradually. Of course, due to the massive budget requirement to implement the green projects, then we just set policy and then implement the policy gradually based on the capacity of our budget. On public sector, under the public financial management reform agenda, number one, we usually have modernized our system by using the ICTs. Of course, we usually improve or we modernize our tax collection system from manual to the ICTs or digital tools. So you don't need to bring the cash to pay to the General Tax Department. You can also use the digital tools to pay a tax. That's also helpful. FMIS business process has been adopted by the government, by the PFM reform agenda to do that. Under the public investment management system reform strategy, we have the regulations at the government's level. Then we invited also the IMF, World Bank to review our public investment management cycle to incorporate the climate change action into elements into the project cycles. So all this has been assisted technically and financially from the ADBs, especially the ADB. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank the ADBs. I think since time is very limited, I should stop here and give a chance to others. Thank you very much, VP.
Thank you very much for sharing that overview and perspective from Cambodia. ANAR, could you share with us how you are approaching and how you believe financial institutions can provide some of the funding that will be required, and which financial institutions are best placed to do that?
Thank you very much. First of all, on behalf of the Agency for Regulation and Development of the Financial Market of Kazakhstan, I'd like to express my gratitude for inviting us to this conference. It's very exciting and to share experience and to exchange opinions with all the participants. So, as we know, the transition to sustainable development and increasing the share of green financing in the economy is one of the key trends, key global trends at the moment. So to this end, Kazakhstan has taken an approach of phased-in approach. Funds through the issuance of green instruments is seen as one of the ways of implementation of sustainable development goals under the ESG standards at the moment. So the government also provides for certain measures like subsidies for bonds that are being issued on the Kazakhstan Stock Exchange and the Astana International Exchange. For the further development of the green financing market, last year we approved a law which provides for a legal framework for issuing and for the circulation of this kind of green bonds in the Kazakhstan Stock Exchange, based on the recommendations of the International Association of Capital Markets Association. These are basically the green and social bonds and sustainable development and related development bonds. So the target areas for the use of funds from the placement of these bonds have also been fixed. They are specifically targeted to environmental, ecological protection, socially significant projects, and also to prevent the cases of misuse of funds that are basically from the placement of these ESG bonds. We've also introduced mandatory procedures for mandatory verification, which is to be done by the external auditors or external consultants, international financial organizations, basically that have experience in this kind of verifications with the ESG bonds. So the practice-wise, since 2021, we've already had 12 issues of ESG bonds for a total amount of more than 171 billion tenge. The issuers were the Eurasian Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the Development Bank of Kazakhstan, and also some quasi-public entities of Kazakhstan. Another important aspect that I want to mention now is the creation of the necessary methodological environment for financial institutions. Currently, because some of the big Kazakhstani banks are already reporting ESG-related information in line with the GRI standards, but still we have smaller banks that are not very familiar with the ESG standards and principles, and also with the need for managing, monitoring, and identifying these kind of risks. That's why at the moment we have also been working on setting some guidelines for the financial market participants in terms of information disclosure, in terms of risk management practices, and corporate governance practices as well. The guidelines are based on best practices like TCFD, GRI standards, or the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. And basically, we've already published these guidelines on the official website of the agency. This year, the financial market will be complying with these requirements on a voluntary basis. And then further in 2024, we plan to move from voluntary disclosure to mandatory disclosure of information. Apart from that, we also want to integrate this ESG risk management practices into the annual supervisory review process. And also we are, right now we are formulating some stress testing scenarios for climate risks that will also be part of supervisory stress testing processes. So yeah, this is basically a short review of the experience of Kazakhstan.
Thank you for that. That very robust and wide-ranging set of initiatives. Thank you for sharing that. Mr. DJAJADI, if we could turn now to Indonesia, perhaps you could share with us what supervisors like OJK are currently doing to help financial institutions scale up sustainable investments, and perhaps you might also share with us some thoughts on how ADB could help. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed Sayyed. Let me just take a few moments to thank ADB for having me on this prestigious event. To begin with, at the SAEED symposium last March in Bali, Finance Minister Ibu Sri Mulyani has mentioned that based on a study, total climate finance required to achieve Indonesia NDZ in 2030 is 281 billion US dollars. While to achieve the net zero emission target in 2060 will reach almost 7 times as much as the need for 2030 NDC. While the government establishing innovative financing mechanism through blended finance, from the financial sector side, in particular the capital market sector, we have been doing several efforts to support financial institutions in scaling up sustainable investments. We develop financial instruments that are ESG compliant, like green bond and green funds. We develop guidance for financial institutions in implementing sustainable principles throughout their business operation and investment. An omnibus law was just enacted in January this year, and it is clearly regulated that sustainability shall be implemented within all aspects of the operation and investment strategy of all business entities in financial sector. We promote sustainability reporting, especially among issuer or listed company. We establish the taxonomy, Indonesia taxonomy. Version 1 was launched in January 2022, and version 2 will be soon. And we strengthen the awareness and build personal value among domestic investors in investing in ESG-based instruments. So they will become part of the transaction process, and this is also very important. Lastly, Indonesia issued a national policy on carbon market to accelerate the achievement of NDC commitment, and carbon exchange is expected to be launched this year, hopefully in September live, and it will be under OJK supervision. Next, how can MDBs contribute to this process? There has been a long record of contribution from MDBs like ADB in joint effort with the government to mobilize financing to accelerate the transition process. MDB's contribution also goes to national authority like OJK to support the policy development and the building of authorities' internal capacity, and also assist in building the capacity of the market. And I believe support that can be provided by MDB like ADB is not only in terms of financing, but also in terms of expertise related to policy, system, infrastructure, technology, and many more. I think that's all for my answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those very succinct and comprehensive set of thoughts. Dr. Kim, perhaps you could share with us what FSC is doing also to support financial institutions in scaling up sustainable investments, and I understand you have some slides for us which we'll put up on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President. My name is KWANGIL Kim from South Korea government. I prepared a short slide for you. Along with the global society, Korea is trying to make a transition to carbon neutrality. Please, next slide. Recently, we set up some policy directions to promote such a transition. So today, I will briefly show you. First, next slide, please. Firstly, we are reorganizing funding flow to sustainable activities. Now we are reducing the investment in brown industry and increasing financing in green sectors. Especially, Korean government are adjusting the proportion of sustainable investment by working with state-backed financial institutions. Our goal is to expand the size of loan made by state-backed financing institution from $20 billion to $100 billion by the end of 2030. We are also defining objectives and category of sustainable investment, like utilize the taxonomy system. We worked closely with the other government body in South Korea and create our own green taxonomy systems that minimize greenwashing in South Korea. Effort on the way to make sure that works well within the financial industry. We also set out a green finance handbook to provide a kind of guideline in the finance sectors. We are also in progress to form a condition to promote a sustainable investment by revising Stewardship Code. You may know that Stewardship Code is a set of rules that institutional investor must follow in order to responsibly manage its capital. Also, Korean exchange, stock exchange, to create a sustainable investment benchmark. This led an increase in index-linked ETFs in field of sustainable investment in South Korea. Next slide, please. Secondly, we are creating a sustainable investment infrastructure that focuses on ESG finance system. We are gradually making ESG mandatory disclosure starting in 2025. We'll make sure that all the KOSPI listed firms publish a sustainable report by the end of 2030. In addition, we also make a ESG rating and data more transparent. You may know that the purpose of the ESG rating system is to rate the performance of firms' ESG activities to help investors make right decision. In Korea, there are some concerns about the transparency of the ESG rating. So we are preparing a set of measures that will enforce rating agency to set up for their own internal control standard to prevent this kind of bad negative effect. Also, we are strengthening the management of climate risk in the finance sectors. We distribute guidelines as well as conduct climate risk stress test on banking sector to measure financial industry's exposure to climate risk. Next slide, please. Lastly, we'll strengthen ESG capacity of finance sectors. We ask the financial institutions to create ESG division within their organizations. We also encourage education and IR activities. Finally, we also promote knowledge sharing of green finance. For example, Korea Exchange is running a sustainable investment platform in which users can obtain all the kinds of information on the sustainable investment. Lastly, we are trying to enhance international cooperation. Korea serves as a member of a Sustainable Standard Advisory Forum, SSAF of IF Foundation, to contribute to make a global standard discourse system. Personally, I'm serving as a representative of Korea of this advice group, SSAF of IF foundations. This is a short picture of current policy measure in South Korea. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then the last person here on the panel before we go virtual, IKEDA-san. We heard, I think, some very interesting comments there about how one changes the mix within investment portfolios, and perhaps you could build on that and share with us a perspective from Japan FSA about which financial instruments will be very promising in support of the scale-up of green finance. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Ahmed. Also, thank you for having me at this very important event. Well, fellow panelists mentioned already green bonds, and that's a typical case for greening the financial markets, and that as you already know, that the use of process type instrument, and that is very closely linked with the development of green taxonomies. And other possible option is the sustainability linked bonds or loans, which could act as a kind of a policy-based loan that ADB provides for the country. But in the case of sustainability linked bonds or loans, it's with the company. So company promise to do something and target something, and investor monitor the progress. And if the company fails to fulfill that promise, there's a penalty. So if that the target is set in a way that certainly promote the green transition of the company, that will promote the greenness of the overall economy in the end. But I think the matter is not necessarily the choice of the instrument. Rather, I think the design of the instrument. For example, in the case of green bonds, we often hear a certain criticism because, well, some small portion of the company activities is separated out for the issuance of the green bonds, but maybe the rest of the company activity remain brown. So that is not necessarily a desired course of action for greening the economy. So we need to make sure that the issuer in entirety will move towards the greener operation, greener business strategy. So in that case, the issuance of green bond itself is not necessarily a good way to go. Rather, we need to go into details of the overall company strategy. So maybe sustainability linked loans and bonds are a good option, but again, in this case, if that certain sustainability related targets are set in a very lenient way, that could go against the whole purpose of issuing sustainability linked loans. So I think in encouraging the desirable design of each financial instrument which truly promote the green finance, in the case of Japan, we issued a certain supervisory guidance for the financial institution to fully engage with the issuers so that overall their company strategy will be well aligned with a certain climate targets which set by Japanese government. And so in setting that kind of expectation of financial institutions, that would cascade down to the overall financial activities of the banks and other financial institutions in Japan, so that the borrower companies or investee companies eventually align with the overall climate goals set by the government. And in designing that kind of greening element of the financial instruments, probably UK government's efforts in setting a certain labeling for funds is also probably a helpful course of action. They set aside 3 categories of labeling for the ESG funds, and one of them is sustainable improvers. That is intended to capture certain climate transition improvement efforts by companies, so that the fund flows really contribute to the change of the business and the change of the business strategy by companies. So I think when issuing a certain financial instrument, going for green bonds or sustainability linked loans, that is a good choice. But I think in a deep dive of the issue requires the proper design of such instruments, so that the issuance of those instruments will eventually lead to the greening of the economy. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And last but certainly not least, we're going to Busha Shafiq, We're sorry you couldn't be with us in person, but very pleased that you're able to join us virtually and we can benefit from your perspective. State Bank of Pakistan has been playing a very important role, one that's been quite noted in recent years in driving the successful implementation of green banking initiatives. I understand you formally launched a sustainable finance framework, including the green banking guidelines. Could you share with us a bit of that story and how it's facilitated financial institutions and helped them to identify and finance green projects and help them to do a better job of reporting on their green finance portfolios? Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting us to this conference. And as we mentioned, unfortunately, I could not get the visa on time and could not interact with you physically. I was now coming to this question of our journey of launching different regulatory framework regarding green or sustainable finance and the reporting of the financial institutions. I think it's very important for me to share with you all that Pakistan, as you know, that Pakistan is one of the most vulnerable countries to these climate events. And this has made us to prioritize or categorize our priorities even within the main focus of the sustainable finance. So in 2017, when we issued our green banking guidelines, which is like a mother document, and it was covering all three major aspects. It was covering risk, so integrating risk into the core risk of financial institutions. Then the sustainable finance, we wanted financial institutions to enhance sustainable finance. And third is the sustainable operation, which is related to their own impact reduction. But when the events of these climate-related events, the frequency of these climate-related events has risen, this has made us focus more on developing the resilience of the banking sector. In 2002, with the help of the IRC, we have issued the ESRM manual, which is the Environmental Social Risk Implementation Manual. And here we have the major focus was on building the resilience of the financial sector. And very importantly, we have included the social sector, social risk in this overall framework. With this, when we have issued this ESRM manual, we have also developed the monitoring and evaluation template, which is coming from the international standards like TCFD. As we have just issued it in the last year, November, so we are expecting that by end of this year, we will be getting some data which will help us to come up with some indications and monitor the financial institutions in a better way. As far as regarding the enhancing green financing is concerned, I would also like to share that on the product development side, we have another scheme which is known as the refinance, which is the financing scheme for the renewable energy. It is prevalent in the market since 2017. And under this scheme, we are offering subsidized financing to the end customers. And this scheme has been very, very successful. It has provided financing to almost 2,400 projects, which is equivalent to capacity of 1,660 megawatts. So these are the major initiatives which we have undertaken. However, we know that there's a journey that has just started and we need to work more. So in our roadmap, the other two things which I would like to focus is, one is that we are in a very initial phase of that we have to develop the taxonomy, and it is our main next milestone which we want to achieve. We have, at the central bank level, we have started doing some stress testing, but it is at very, very initial level. And that's another thing which we would like to incorporate in our as our next milestones. So that's broadly, these are the initiatives which we have taken over these last few years. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much for sharing that perspective. I see we've got about 12 minutes left.
So thank you for great presentations and insight about your counter cases. My name is Rustam. I'm from Central Bank of Azerbaijan, leading Financial Stability Department. Recently, we adopted Sustainable Finance Roadmap and started implementation. A few challenges that we faced while preparation and implementation, I would like to get your insight about that. First of all, when we talk about sustainable finance, besides environmental, there are social and governance, and we had a difficulty in quantifying and converting specific actions of the social and governance aspects. So if you have any, some hints for us in that case, how to convert these objectives to measurable specific actions. And second, when we look at awareness, we understand it's very important. Besides the awareness in financial sector, it's important to have the awareness of the private sector, I mean households and MSMEs, because there should be some demand for such products along with some stimulus, etc. But it is outside of the limit of central bank. So if there are any cases to share about how successfully develop programs in partnership with different entities to increase awareness in households and MSMEs? Yeah, thank you.
The first on how to quantify certain intangible actions, especially social and governance, and then second, how to build awareness. Let me ask if anybody on the panel would like to offer. Please.
Let me answer the first question. I think the quantifying the social aspects of governance aspects is a universally difficult task. So I think even the ESG rating and evaluation agency are struggling with. So I think when dealing with that social aspects or the governance aspects, we sometimes need to go for a certain question-based survey so that we can quantify through that survey that the progress we make in terms of the social aspects and governance aspects. And probably it requires a certain not only quantitative analysis but qualitative analysis. So I don't have any silver bullet or magic wand for resolving that issue. But I think in partnership with certain, as I mentioned, ESG rating or data providers, you can find a certain scores or the certain evaluation that will be best suited to your objective.
Thank you. Anyone want to take the question on building awareness? I think communications increasingly moving to the center of focus for central bankers globally. Anybody have any reactions to that?
Ahmed, can I?
Please.
Sure, yeah. So I would like to take both the questions and like to share our experience of the Central Bank of Pakistan. Before I go to the capacity building and awareness raising, I will briefly talk about the disclosures that the financial institution. So when we started the green banking guidelines in 2017, we have started taking some information portfolio from the financial institutions. But that was all qualitative. And even after the issuance of the ESRM manual, it is initially the qualitative, and then we expect that with the time we will be introducing the quantitative measures in this. So with this, I just want to highlight that when you are sensitizing the market and when you are just introducing it, so initially maybe you cannot put those quantifiable measures initially. So with the time you evolve from that, and then you can bring in the quantitative measures. And as has already been mentioned, particularly with respect to the social, it gets very, very difficult as well. Now, coming to the capacity building and awareness, yes, even when we are doing when we have issued this framework, we realize that it's not only the issue on the demand side when we are saying the customers and then households, it's also on the financial institution side. The awareness is very low and they need the handholding. In case of Pakistan, we are adopted a multi-pronged set of strategy. We are not only doing different programs on our own and with the help of some international stakeholders, but we are, and we have got a training subsidiary as well. So it is doing very customized and targeted program, not only for the banking industry, but they are arranging with the help of the banking industry different seminars to increase the awareness of their clients as well. Even with this ESRM manual, and when we are saying that they have to, we are working on another project which is like the Green Business Facilitation Manual. It is like a guideline for the banks which will help them to help their customer to come up with the different kind of strategies or technologies which will help them to go towards the green financing. So in this way, we are doing it from both the sides. We are not only using different seminars and conferences and so on, but we're also making banks to help their customers to come to this side, which is the green finance. Thank you.
Especially for my area of work is very much important, and we are really working a lot on strengthening capital management.
Horizon, kailangan ka maghanda kasi ang ating Pilipinas ay pwedeng bisitahin Bagyo, Lindol, pagsabog ng bulkan at tsunami. Maghanda ka at palitinin ng mga mahal sa buhay at isama mo na yung mga listeners.
Good morning, Miss Horizon, ito sa ating project Maghanda.
Good morning, Miss Horizon Chaser. Welcome.
Happy morning.